All right, we're coming up to January. We're just a couple of days from January. And of course, it was named after the mythological god Janus. I don't know if he's Greek or Roman or whatever, but he had two faces, supposedly, that one looked forward, the other one looked back. So the guy that we go to is kind of the Janus of InfoWars, a guy who looks forward and back, is Gerald CELENTE. He is an expert at pointing out trends. As a matter of fact, he publishes Trends Journal. He's not just a trend forecaster, but he's also a publisher, a business consultant, author. You can find that at trendsresearch.com. Thank you for joining us, Gerald. What do you see? Let's look a little bit back at last year, the trends that you saw in 2017, and then let's get a little bit of an idea of what you see as trends coming up in the next year, 2018.
Well, we were we forecast the Trump market rally in 2017, and also the cryptocurrency craze that we see right now. And interestingly enough, we're looking back, but on Real News, we're looking ahead. And anyone listening in, all they have to do is go to the mainstream media, go to every website, the biggest newspapers, the biggest business media, the mainstream media. You know all they're doing? They can only look back.
That's right.
These are the stories of 2017. No one wants to look forward.
That's right.
They can't see what's going on. They don't want to know what's going on. They're stuck in the past. So the people that are tuning into Real News are getting not only the past, because that's what trends are. It's an understanding of where we are, how we got here, so we could see where we're going. But nobody else is doing that.
That's right. That's very important. And when we look at, you're talking about the big trends that you'd forecast for 2017 a year ago. You were looking at the stock market rally and other things like that were based on the expectation of tax cuts and of regulation cuts. So are you optimistic now that we're getting the real thing? I mean, people are looking at this. We've got the EU, we've got China out there saying, this is going to be really bad for our economies. I don't know how we're going to compete with this because Trump is taking some of the burden off of the backs of the American people. How are we going to respond to this?
Well, again, there are negatives and positives to this Trump plan as we see it. For example, when you go back to 2004, when Bush had a lot of money repatriated, he found $300 billion in tax breaks, bringing back. Most of it went into stock buybacks. When you look at what's going on now, it's not like these corporations aren't making any dough. I mean, they're hiding overseas, but they're not putting the money into capital improvements, David. They're putting it into stock buybacks, and that's very important to recognize. I mean, those are facts. And we're concerned about that in the sense that not enough is going down to the rest of us as we look at it. And again, that's the data that's being put out there, whether it's coming from the tax committees within Congress and other groups. So yes, it's going to be a positive. Yes, those are the reasons why the economy the markets are growing. But again, there's a disconnect too between markets and what we the people are living as well. Because when you look at a lot of the data, and it's been going on for quite some time now, median household income is below 1999 levels. What they're freaking out about mostly overseas is that Trump is going to reinstitute trade agreements that make sense for us. The ones that we have now are a total ripoff by the multinationals. And the reason that the Americans got their stuff made overseas in China going back to around 2000 and the late 90s was because they had slave labor. It was not so it was. So you can still make the stuff over there, bring it back up here, and mark up the prices. So what he's doing on those fronts with NAFTA, a renegotiation of World Trade Organization agreements, those are what's really going to drive the economy in a solid way, because it will give people jobs that pay living wages rather than giving tax breaks to a guy like Jeff Bezos, who's one of the richest men in the world, worth over $100 billion to give him a $5 billion tax break so he could build a slave camp that where you got your degree in shipping, handling, and packaging, you make nothing,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
$28,000 a year. So those are the differences. And also very important, the United States and Europe sold their countries out by going to China, where you can't own the company. You only can own 49% of it. We gave them all our technology, all
That's
that
right.
we, the people, paid for. So these little lowlives could make more dough by getting their stuff made there. And now China's taking that technology and they're moving forward with it.
A big part of the China price is not just the currency manipulation, but a big part of the China price, which makes them so competitive and we can't compete with them, is the fact that you point out they steal the technology. People will come over there and say they're going to open up a car facility. The government takes a major stake in the company, and then they start creating a car exactly like the one, for example, that GM is going to create, and they put that car out there in competition with the GM car. So you can't beat they're pirates, basically. We're going to be talking to Gerald CELENTE. Stay with us. We're going to have some trends for 2018. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Gerald CELENTE, who publishes Trends Journal. You can find it at trendsresearch.com. Talking about trends coming up for 2018. I want to get your comment on this, Gerald, because there's an interesting article on Zero Hedge saying that the Trump tax cuts may be the spark that burns down the EU, and their rationale on this is that a lot of people have talked about this state and local taxes deduction being taken away from the high tax states in the Northeast and California, where the wealthy are typically the ones who are taking advantage of that, of course, but saying that that was a big knife in the back to Trump's political opponents. But this guy, his name is Tom Luongo, writing this article for Zero Hedge, said it may be the spark that burns down the EU. And his thinking on this is that as they're looking at this stagflation that they've got, or what, they're kind of a stagnant economy. And the idea that as these funds are repatriated, for example, like from Apple, he says, hey, they've got $282 billion. What if they start bringing this money back, even if they put it in the stock purchase buybacks, as you were just pointing out, if it's just for their own, benefit. But if they're pulling back these reserves out of the European central banks and the depositors, the investments and things like that, they're taking out $5 billion a month. He says, what if they did $5 billion a month out of the European banking system? Is that going to have a huge effect on those banks and on the EU? What do you think?
What the effect is going to be, and this is running counter to what a lot of people are saying, is that if you're pulling out all that money, then what that's going to do is that's going to raise the value of the dollar. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people are missing right now, because they're saying that the dollar is going to deflate in 2018. But if this money is repatriated, you're selling one currency, you're buying another, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's going to drive up the value of the dollar.
And drive down the euro at the same time if they're pulling it back from Europe.
But again, this is where the controversy is right now, because there are two camps out there. There's one camp out there saying that the euro is going to go to $1.30. It's around about $1.18, $1.19 now as we're speaking. And so that now, if the dollar gets too strong, that also hurts us on the trade front, mm-hmm. because it costs more to buy American. Also drives up the prices, and it costs more to buy commodities because they're priced in dollars. So petrodollars, you buy oil, it's priced in dollars, gold, dollars. So there's a negative and a positive to it. But I, for one, living in a country, would rather have a strong currency than a weak one. Sure. And what also does, it undermines and shows really the fraud of what's going on in Europe, where they still have negative interest rates. So they're buying up corporate bonds and government bonds. And this is, by the way, when people say the capitalist system is broken, this isn't capitalism. You never learn about in Economics 101 about negative interest rates and quantitative easing, man. It's made this stuff up. So, yes, that'll have a negative effect on Europe. The totality of what Trump is doing is better for the economy. On the specifics, again, the people in the middle class, as we review the data, aren't getting as much as we believe they should be getting. And as a guy that lives in New York, and these taxes, by the way, we're paying, people don't realize, we pay ridiculous state, city, and school taxes. They're off the charts. And so we were allowed to deduct those, and now we got to pay double. So that's hurting a lot of people, and it's not only the rich, believe me.
Yeah, but it's also going to create, as people have looked at this, they said, well, it's going to highlight the fact that those taxes are so high in New York and Chicago and California. And we've seen a mass exodus of populations from those areas to lower tax areas. So they said, as they're looking at this as a political calculation, that this would increase the electoral college strength of Trump as more people move to these states that typically support Trump. And if they move out of New York or California because they want lower taxes, they'd be more likely to vote for a Republican candidate. What do you think about that?
Again, it's just so you just can't pick up and move. I mean, you got a business, you have a life. It's hurting a lot of people, I'm telling you. The taxes are so ridiculously stupid, and there's a good reason for it. So I have to defend the good reason. You got a bunch of jerks running the show, a bunch of ignorant morons, and people like to call them their governors, their senators, and assemblymen, and congressmen. It's a freak show in a city and a state near you.
Yes. I would like to see, as you point out, I'd like to see much deeper tax cuts for everybody. And I'm not concerned about rich people getting more money. If they're paying more taxes and you cut everybody by the same amount of percentage, of course they're going to get more money. And so they play that envy game with people. And then they also play this deficit game. These people who never cared about the deficit doubling, the cumulative debt doubling under Obama in 8 years. He added more to the cumulative debt than all the previous presidents combined, and they had nothing to say about it. But then Bernie Sanders and Bob Corker all come out and say, don't cut any more taxes for anybody because we can't take it with a deficit.
Yeah, look, what I'm against this corporate welfare. I'm against both of them at the extremes. But giving these big companies money, like I said, like a guy like Bezos, tax break to open up you're worth $100 billion and we're giving you a tax break? That's what I'm against.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're going to take this money like Apple. I think they'll come back in and they'll buy up their stock. I mean, their stock has already taken a hit because of poor iPhone X sales. It took a hit when they announced that these updates that are constantly pushing to you on your older phone will make your phone run slower. So they've had some hits against their stock. They'll pump that into their, take that and reinvest it in their stock, and it'll pump up some more this stock market bubble for at least the beginning of 2018, don't you think?
It will, yeah. Again, we only see the markets coming down about 10%. And it's going to be because of an outside influence. That's one of our trends. And what we're most concerned about is what's going on in the Middle East, and particularly with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States in this fight against Iran. We're very concerned about that because if war breaks out with Iran, it's going to not only bring down the equity markets, it'll crash them around the world. So we're looking for like a black swan event. We don't see the economic fundamentals, even though the markets are overvalued now at levels that are pre-1929 crash and dot-com bubble crash. Because you're going to get more money coming in that's going to keep pushing them back up.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Middle East. I mean, you're talking about a black swan event. If we have a regional war, because of this new crown prince in Saudi Arabia and these other people trying to push a war. If something happens that sends a shock through the energy prices, all people have to do is go back and look at previous times when we've had a shock to the system from energy prices and look at the devastation that it does to the economy. That would be the single most devastating thing to the economy. Whether or not we get involved with a lot of bloodshed, it's going to have a lot of economic consequences for us if there's a Middle Eastern war. Exactly,
and that's one of our top trends for 2018. And by the way, Saudi Arabia's in a recession. They need oil at $100 a barrel for their economy to break even, their balance sheet to break even. And when all else fails, you know, they take you to war. And that's what this guy is doing, as we see it, particularly what's going on in Yemen that doesn't make the news at all. And what's going on with the expansion about what's in Lebanon and then in Syria. Israel is saying that Iran's not going to stay in Syria. We won't let them. You're not going to. What were you to say that?
Yeah, so yeah. Let's talk about that more, about what's happening in the Middle East, because the other part of this tax reform bill that just came through, of course, there was the eventual removal of the Obamacare mandate, but there was also ANWR unleashing oil there, which may happen. Who knows what the time frame is going to be? They just required some auctions to open up some of that oil reserves. That would have big economic consequences for Saudi Arabia. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Gerald CELENTE. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Gerald CELENTE, looking at trends coming up in 2018. Of course, Gerald is the publisher of Trends Journal. You can find it at trendsresearch.com, a great publication, always very, very insightful. We were just talking, Gerald, about stocks, and you said, look, the equity markets are up to pre-1929 levels, adjusted for inflation, and with the capital that's being repatriated, probably going to be reinvested by these big corporations back into their own stock. They'll probably keep that equity market bubble going a little bit more. When we look at oil, the big question mark, especially for oil, not just for oil, but for the entire economy, is whether or not there's going to be more war there. And just as we're going to break, I said, you know, the other part of this tax cut bill was to open up some drilling, a small part of the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, what they call ANWR. If that were to be done quickly, that would put even more pressure on the Saudis, as you correctly point out. They're in a tremendous recession because the price of oil is below what they really need to see. Is that going to, you know, we see so often that when the economy is failing, governments like to take people's minds off of that by starting a war. Do you think that increases the likelihood of war in the Middle East?
Well, it's definitely going to It's too much oil and it's more oversupply, supply and demand issue, period, sure. Paragraph. And America, by 2020, will be producing more oil and gas than the biggest producer in the world, which is Russia. So opening up even more is going to put even more downward pressure on oil prices. And again, the Saudis are very desperate in what they're doing. Oh, and they're pumping the crown prince. I told you how he became a crown prince.
Go ahead, tell us. Yeah, they kiss a frog, or
the princess kissed the frog.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. We talked about that last time.
This stuff up. These guys in 1932, this gang was creepy. Prince, you know, save it. Yeah, the crown prince. Don't forget the bow. Anyway, they're saying, you know, he's getting rid of corruption. This is the guy that bought that Da Vinci piece for almost $500 million.
That's right. It was a Christ painting or something like that, you know, going to a Muslim. When things get tough, he goes shopping, doesn't he?
And he just bought a Louis XIV chateau for $400 million, and he bought a $500 million yacht. So he's really doing a great thing about getting rid of corruption.
Yeah.
But go
how's that for irony? He doesn't understand the meaning of irony, does he?
You know, again, when I talk about politicians before, here's a definition. This is out of Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and anybody could Google these up. So when people fight and they say, I like that politician, that's my kind of politician. Well, here's a politician. A person who acts in a manipulative and devious way, typically to gain advancement within an organization. A person primarily interested in political office for selfish or other narrow, usually short-sighted reasons. Don't forget to. And
that's why people used to say, don't call me a politician, call me a statesman. But you don't hear anybody being called a statesman anymore for that very reason. They're all politicians, right?
They're all politicians. So that's another one of our big trends for 2018. We call it blockchain democracy.
There you go. Yeah.
So everybody knows about the blockchain. This thing, you can't knock through it. You make a deal, it's sealed. But Transaction sealed. Now, why can't we vote online? It's better than the corrupt systems that we have now. What a jerky, stupid system. You got to go wait online to vote. We could vote on our computers. So let's talk about the Trump tax plan. Why can't we vote on it?
Yeah,
Why can't we vote if you want to go to war in Syria or Somalia? No, don't give me this stuff that these people are smarter than me, because if you believe the definition of a politician, I don't think so.
Yeah,
and are we?
right.
So
well, for the people who have, Gerald, for the people who have concern about direct democracy, I would point out that the original First Amendment that they didn't go with addressed having a limit to the number of people that could be represented by a politician. And we've seen in places like New Hampshire that when they have like in New Hampshire, a small population state, they have something like, it's over 400 people in their state house. And if a few years ago, if you spent more than $1,000 to get elected to the state house, you were accused of buying the election. So it really brought the representative democracy closer to the people. We could do that with blockchain technology like you're talking about. We could have 6,000 representatives. If we went with the original, what the original intent of the founders was to have no more than 50,000 people represented by a congressman, it would be something like 6,000 congressmen. That would really democratize the Congress, wouldn't it?
Yes, we'll tell our politicians how to vote. Hey, you know what they forgot? They roll out the red carpet. They're always saluting these people all over the world. They forgot two words: public servant.
That's right. That's right.
With blockchain democracy, there's no reason why we can't vote on major issues and tell the people that are and that's the other politicians. These guys never worked a day in their lives. They've been sucking off the public, you know what, forever. And by the way, I was the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate at 23 years old. I was there firsthand, bam, right at the top. And I saw what a bunch of, how grown men grovel to suck their way up to the top. They'll sell out their mother because a politician is a person who acts in a manipulative and devious way, typically to gain advancement within an organization.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I've had people who were pages in the North Carolina legislature saw this guy who had been there for years. He was like Jabba the Hutt, they call him. His name was Liston Ramsey. And basically people would just line up and kiss his ring like a mafia don. I mean, that was what was going on there.
Yeah. So direct democracy, as you said, why not? This system isn't working. It's only enriching the rich. And by the way, it's another one of our trends. Follow the yellow Silk Road. China's buying up the world. Their new Silk Road is their Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to be connecting Eurasia, Asia, parts of Africa, Europe. They're investing trillions into this. The business of China is business. The business of America has become war.
That's right. So, that's right.
Whether you like the Chinese or not the issue. The difference that I'm making here, we're pointing out China's an inside-out government. The central government runs the show. Everybody's on board. If you're not on board, you're out of here. In the United States, it's run from the outside. We have all these special interests paying off all of these little lowlights called politicians that are primarily interested in political office or for selfish or other narrow, usually short-sighted reasons. So we don't have a government that's pushing the economy forward for the benefit of all of us. We got a bunch of jerks like little Bernie Sanders, who never worked a day in his life, and I'm going to give you free education. All of these people, John Insane McCain, Lindsay, did you come out of the closet yet? Graham, Nancy out of her mind, Pelosi, Eddie Munster Ryan. What's going on over here? What I'm saying making is they're making the decisions that are destroying the nation because they're getting paid off. That's the end of the story. So China, follow the Yellow Silk Road, because as these politicians are destroying our future here and not what's doing best for us, but doing best to fulfill their own little egos, China's doing it to build their economy bigger. Here's a number. When China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, 2 weeks after 9/11, when no one was paying attention, 5% of their population was middle class. Today, 35%.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. And they're running this like these guys, they're the inside leadership of the Chinese government, even though they're communist, even though they're authoritarian, they're running this. They see themselves as like the board of directors of this giant corporation. And even though the people in China are still very poor, they're seeing this increase. And that is where their power base lies, and people who are happy with seeing at least an increase in their standard of living. Thank you so much for joining us, Gerald CELENTE. You can find Trends Journal at trendsresearch.com. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Gerald, and wish you a happy new year, and hope that we can talk many times in the coming year. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And that concludes our broadcast. Thanks for watching.
In ancient times, man roamed the earth in a constant state of hunting or being hunted. Introducing Caveman, where cutting-edge science meets ancient super nutrients. Secure your bottle right now at InfoWarsStore.com.